What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Ancient Wisdom, your weekly Pokemon TCG podcast. My name is Corey Roush. With me, as always, is DJ Keener. DJ, how are you?
What's up, Corey? Living the dream, man. How are you?
Yeah, about the same. I think I might be the only person I know that actually likes the weather that we're having right now. I don't mind that it's like 50 degrees. Other than that, I'm alive, so take that for what you will.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
I'm chill with the weather. It is what it is. It's nice to not have to run heat. Or this is the most like adult take on that possible. It cost me $0 for it to be this temperature. So
yep, yep. Mine's similar of like, well, I can actually wear whatever I want because like it's not too warm for jeans, but it's also not too cold for shorts, so I'm
oh
in a
yeah,
nice
yeah.
place. Um, yeah, so we're gonna get into the week that was. I don't know what have you. Let's start there. What have you played mostly over the last week since we've talked? I know that today we're gonna be more of a focused show on in terms of one archetype. Is that what you've been playing mostly, or are there other things that you've been playing?
For the last 2 days, I have been pretty much all in on different comfy decks. Before that, I had been kind of wrapping up my tour around the different Lugia decks to see what I liked and get a little bit more into that. It has nothing to do with it being a Duraludon deck, but the Duralists have just not been working for me. It's something that I definitely need to like iterate on a little bit more. But you give up a lot of consistency slots to fit things like extra impact energies and a 2/2 Duraline as opposed to something like a 1/1 Urshi line or just greeting and saying we don't need any special things. We'll just play like Eve, uh, Stonedrenner, and Titar. So
Hmm.
just kind of working through that stuff. I need to work a little bit more on the Dura stuff to try to figure out what works there, which is definitely like my next project to keep working on for myself because I'm pretty happy with my other Lugia stuff. But then just playing a ton of different Lost Zone decks. What about you?
Plenty of Lost Zone as always. Definitely some control, but I know that like we joked offline that you assumed that control would subsume my entire week, and it really hasn't as much as usual. Whether it be because like I don't know, like I think the deck is good, but I don't necessarily like where I'm at on the yellow ladder. Like it just doesn't make sense playing it. Like the matchups you're prepared for, not what you're going to be seeing on a regular basis. So like yeah, I'm gonna lose to like Calyrex or like pick like I've played like unfortunately there was a stretch where I played like three different Soul Rock Lunatone decks in an
Mm-hmm.
hour, and I was like, well,
Just unwinnable.
yeah. So what am I doing here? Why am I wasting my time? So it's like that's the kind of thing that I think I've tabled until I eventually hopefully climb up. So yeah, a lot of Lost Zone. Unfortunately, some Arctina. I don't like. I know I'll never sign up with Arceus. I don't want to say never because that seems like an over exaggeration. I don't want to ever sign up with an Arc deck. But like I can also see why people would because like it is good. It's not necessarily my playstyle,
Yeah,
but I
yeah.
understand that it's good. So I've been trying to force myself to do that. So I'm not just like if it ever
Mm-hmm.
turns around that I end up wanting to play it. It's not like well I haven't played Arceus in a year.
Right, right.
So
Just keeping
yeah
your options open. I think
yeah
the devil's advocate like argument for playing control anyway is like I to me especially like the latter games have very little to do with winning or losing and more like just
yeah
like learning and understanding situations. Like I concede a ton of ladder games instead of finishing them out. Like that's ignoring the fact that like if you're playing during the day, like shit just happens that you're not able to pay attention to your turns. The Sander
that
deck
too.
especially is like you get distracted for a turn or you're not like able to give it the full attention to like game plan out
Or
exactly how
like
you need to use your resources.
big stupid the number of times I've accidentally clicked the Forest Steel Stone button as opposed
Hmm.
to the Rotom ability button, and then
Oh
I'm like
yeah,
well,
this is
or
bad.
vice versa. It's like well that see you later.
Yep,
So
yeah, exactly. It's just I again I think it's just more about like identifying situations and learning how to handle certain game states and stuff, which I
yep
think you are able to do at like any rank with any deck on the ladder. Like sometimes I feel like instead of playing out games that you feel like you have a really good understanding of how that specific game state's going to play out. Like if you're literally just testing, it's almost better to just concede and go next, even if you're going to win. Like,
yeah
yeah,
that makes
it's just
sense.
about how you budget your time, right?
Yes, sir. And then like I know I want to get into Guardy more, and we've talked about that. Like I want to actually test that because it is like it seems like the deck that like literally everybody likes now
Hmm.
after Tord played it, which is partially Tord and partially the
Unsurprising to
deck
everybody,
thing.
right?
Yeah. So I want to at least, and I know that it's going to be like obviously it's purported to be insane next set as well. So I want to at least get myself familiar with that as well. But with us like
We buying a
preparing to talk,
champions festivals now. Then
no,
what's the price on those bad
uh,
boys up to?
what?
What's the price on those bad boys up to?
I think last I looked it was 500, but I'm not sure if that's. Let's see, TCG player right now. This is riveting listening to. There's one for that's a staff one though, but it's 750.
Well, there you go.
There's a regular one
I
that
got one
is
for 475. I bet it's not English.
this one's 470. This is 473. That's an English one.
Boom. See?
Yeah. So, and I mean, like, if it makes anyone feel better, which obviously it will not, it seems that you only play one of it. So,
If it makes anyone feel any better, that would not be the most expensive card either of us have purchased to play with.
no, no. Would it be the most expensive one that I purchased just for testing? Probably, because I don't know.
Yeah, it's just going to go up, though.
Yeah, no, obviously. Like, if you're just like if you're looking at it as an investment, probably don't play with it. Just like hold it. But
Yeah, and then play it at
regardless.
like the tournament, right? I'm just saying, like, I
Yeah,
don't think you get them any cheaper if you're, interested. There is like a limited quantity problem here.
no. The funniest joke I saw was someone put on Twitter, "Hey, maybe they'll just make Beach the world's promo this year just to
I
really
love
mess with
that.
people." That'd be hysterical. And like actually say this is not like it doesn't do. Don't give it an updated like
No, it stays
eligibility
illegal
marker.
in standard. That'd be
Yeah,
amazing.
that would make me really happy.
Yep, for
Um,
sure, for sure.
but like we're the wrong kind of people there. But yeah, so let's get into the topic of the week. We wanted to kind of look at all of the Lost Zone decks because there are a number of them. And coming into the format, it was like before people really got like prepared or were like looking towards the UIC. When we first saw this rotation, we're like, well, okay, Lost Zone is going to be the deck, 30% play rate when you combine all the variants. It's
Hmm.
probably pretty close to that anyway. But the results are kind of a mixed bag, right? I know that it was not as nearly as impressive at UIC as we thought it would be. And coming out of a UIC, I looked at the online data for the last, like, I guess, like 8 days at this point. There have been 16 tournaments with at least 50 players in them. And looking at the top eights for that, there are one, two, three. There's 7 different versions of Lost Box that have made top eight in these 16 respective tournaments. There are only, and so like we're going to talk about each of them kind of individually, but I wanted to kind of like get out in front of this and say there's 3 that have double-digit tops and only one that has more than one win. If you had to guess which 3 had double-digit tops of all the variants, where would your head go?
Um, just like Forest Seal, Lost Box, Gudra, and I'm actually gonna guess Teeny, even though I think it's unplayable.
Yeah, so I was at one thing I misspoke on. There are 2 with 2 wins, and that's part of the issue, right? One is Gudra with 14 tops, which is actually just insane. 14 tops out of 16 tournaments is a pretty strong ratio whenever it's just one version of the deck.
Hmm.
Forest Seal playing just Forest Seal Stone had 10 with 1 win, and Giratina had 10 with 2 wins. So yeah, and then like, but just for clarification, the rest were if some would play a split of Sky and Forest Seal Stone, mostly with just Dragonite and Raikou. A couple did play Kyogre. There was 3. Sablezard had 5 tops. Sky Steel Stone only had 2, which is kind of surprising considering like coming in it was like thought of as being the version of the deck.
Hmm.
And then
Hmm.
there's another one that I know Dave, you and I had talked about independently where you had said you hadn't looked at much yet. I'm intrigued by it at least a little bit. The single prize only, no V's whatsoever. Playing Kyogre, there was
Yeah,
3 tops with 1 win.
yeah. I think that deck is interesting and probably pretty good. It's kind of same like concept as Sablezard, except you lean further into Sableye. You have the Greninja ability to kind of do more damage with the Sableye, and you get to end on Kyogre. Um, Which is interesting because the big thing that feels missing to me when I play Sablezard is the fact that like I don't have the Greninja to dig through my deck more, and especially those judges. Like the uh, idea that Lost Box is really bad against Judge really comes from Sablezard because you don't have the Greninja to help rebuild either. So
Yeah.
it's an interesting deck. I'm not sure. Like I would need to get really into the weeds with messing with it to try to kind of refine it a little bit more. I'm not sure I love like the lists that are out there yet, but maybe they're really good. I just haven't had a chance to play with that one in particular.
Yeah. I feel like most of my time has been spent with Gudra. It was the deck I played most going into EIC, like just as like preparing for us to talk about
Hmm.
that format generally. So that's kind of where I ended up right now anyway. But where do you let's not start there because I feel like one that'll be most of my conversation, and two, I feel like we might as well save what is currently the best for last. Which of the versions do you want to talk about to start this off?
I guess let's talk about Sablezard first because that's the one that did have technically the best finish at EUIC, and I think that arguably has the most like room for different choices, even if it's just kind of like counts on cards. Um, because I think Pedro's list was very good, but I'm not sure that it's good in like the greater sense. I think it was really good in that tournament. Do you have any thoughts on that list? And I guess how do you want to approach the deck in general?
No, like I think I agree, but like I remember when it was like when we first saw the list, we're like, ooh, I don't know if I like the idea in theory. I like what they're doing here, but I don't necessarily like the list overall. I think that like one of the things that has become a common tech, and I don't think it will last. I think it was more for this event, and I think most people there would say it is the now I'm blanking on it, the Mall
Oh,
Wow
wow,
that
yeah.
it was like the tech of the event, and then now that it's out there, I think other decks will be adapting to it. Like you already saw, like I mean, especially like an example is if people adopt the penny in towards list, that
Mm,
immediately starts outing it. So um that was one thing that like I liked for the event, but not going forward. I like Sable's art, but like we've talked about this plenty, where it's one of those things that it can just like your early game is very
yeah,
like it's much slower than the rest, especially like if you expect to play against a lot of mirrors, you're in for a real slog there.
absolutely.
I don't like I'm bringing up Pedro's list now because like I've been looking at specifically the online ones and where they had gone, so bear with me while it's reloading slowly because of course now I want to see it. Uh, Um, yeah, it's I understand the mill tank, and we've talked about the mill tank some. That's a tech that I've seen in some other lists as well. I don't personally think it's necessary. But that's all that really stands out besides the Mawile is like what is a tech from beyond this, because a lot of the ones that play for Sealstone at this point are playing the Pidgeot, so that would have been a tech before that, but I think that that's becoming a little bit more commonplace, so you can like not leave it in play.
Mm.
Nothing else really.
Now, do you think the Pidgeot is worth it? Like Pidgeot Force Stone without playing Wawa?
Um, I don't know yet. The little bit that I've played with the deck, and like it's like it's another way to like make this work as the turbo version,
Hmm.
which the argument is then just play the turbo version. But like so I can see that aspect of it, right? In the sense that sometimes you like your first turn, especially in this, like you're going to be so far behind if your first turn does not involve a Colress. And do I really want to use my V-Star power to get a Colress on turn one? Not specifically, but
No, you don't, right? But you do what you have to do.
yeah, so if that's the only way out of it, and like you're already, like I said, you're already playing in this list, you're already playing three Poke Gears,
Hmm.
you're playing enough switch cards, obviously, with like, and like you should theoretically hit a turn one Colress almost every game. So guaranteeing that with a Forest Seal Stone, I can kind of get, but you're not really guaranteeing it either, right? Because it's only
Right.
one Seal Stone.
It's still a two-card combo.
Yeah, I don't know. I like I've tested it some, and I've liked it, but I don't know if I like it just because it's made it so I didn't have to concede immediately, and or because it was actually good. You know what I mean?
Right, right. Yeah, I think those are kind of the most flexible like set of slots in the list. Like the Mill Tank, I think is its own beast, and then the Mawile, Pidgey, Forest Heelstone. Like if you're playing Mawile, you have to play those cards.
I
So I sort
agree.
of package them together. If you don't play Mawile, you still can play Pidgey, Forest Heelstone. Um, and like the thing you're really trying to accomplish with this deck from like a play pattern is like if you go first, you want to go comfy turn one, and then
Hmm.
comfy chorus, comfy chorus for your next two turns. You want your second attacking turn to be able to attack with Sablezard. Um, and the Pidgey is helpful there if you need to like force Seal Stone for the chorus, but it just doesn't feel like that's really like a great option for doing it. I guess I would almost rather play like the fourth Pokegear or some trekking shoes or something if I was that concerned about hitting. Um, Going second, I think it's a little more interesting because ideally you do kind of the same thing, like chorus comfy, both turn one and two when you're going second, and then
Yeah,
vacuum your own card to attack. And vacuuming your own card to get to 10 in your last zone is a lot easier when you have four seal stone. And that line in particular is especially interesting to me. And just to use Pedro's list and the list that the American group that played Sablezard played as the example, none of them played Choice Belt. So, like, you're pretty limited even on your targets to vacuum yourself if you don't put at least a copy of Belt in your deck if you cut those. Um, Now, for me personally, I've been leaning towards no Forest Seal Stone. Uh, I just don't think like these like funky combinations of two cards are really helping you make your deck any better in a lot of situations. And the Pidgey can be pretty awkward if like you have to discard it at any point or anything like that happens. There's nothing in this deck necessarily to make you discard, but like things happen in games. It's possible, and I don't really want to end up with that in my discard pile ever to get something like Echoing Horn.
Yeah,
Um,
that's miserable.
yeah, exactly. But one of the big things for this list, like that makes it preferential to the other ones, is that you can do some. You have a little bit more game using the Charizard against something like the Gudra, so that's at least helpful for those matchups.
Hmm.
Um, and one of the other big tech things that's not in Pedro's list, if I'm remembering correctly, is he didn't play the cross switchers, right? He
I don't
has
know. We
less
did not.
switches, yeah. So that's something that I have really liked in the deck by comparison. Not
Mhm.
playing them feels like a mistake to me.
Yeah, I can definitely see that, and I started with his list, and then I also played like, and this is obviously off on another version of the deck, but like Nick Moffat's deck, and I found in both of those that I generally missed it because they like you should be
Mhm.
affording yourself the extra spaces to play those,
Mhm.
and when you have that space and you play it on other cards, it just feels like you're missing an opportunity there.
Yeah,
So yeah,
absolutely,
I definitely
absolutely.
agree with that.
I think that one of the things that's been kind of an interesting question from various lists that I've looked at is like how many Manaphies and how many Clairs do you play? Do you have any personal opinion here? Do you think one way is right? But basically, from like my perspective, you play four combined copies, whether that's two Manaphy, two Clara, or one Manaphy, three Clara. I think there's enough matchups where like you have to keep Manaphy on your board every turn that the question sort of becomes how willing are you to give up a turn to Clara it back versus playing a chorus?
Yeah, um, yeah, it's I go back and forth a lot. I think the total count that you said is where I end up at almost all times. I think I want it right now to be 2-2, but like it also again it depends on the version of the deck. Like in the Sablezard one, and this would like it just depends because like if I'm playing the Sablezard and I want to play two Clara, I would probably forego anything like a Mirage Gate because sometimes they play Mirage Gate to like get an earlier Charizard attack or play Basin to get multiple Charizard attacks, right? If I'm foregoing that option, then I'm fine with two Clark because you're not trying to like loop Charizard as many times. You know what I mean? So then I kind of
Yeah,
like the idea of the two
yeah.
two. If I'm playing some of the tech to actually pull that off, then I think I would probably lean more towards the 3-1, which is not necessarily an answer in terms of like like the specific Manaphy issue because I agree with you. There's a few matchups where you do want it in play at essentially all times,
Mhm.
but yeah, I think it's more about how you end up wanting to map out your prizes over like actually what your opponent's doing, if that makes sense. And I don't know if you necessarily agree with that, but that's kind of like my thought process whenever it comes to like choosing my counts on those two cards.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I guess like the slots aren't necessarily interchangeable because they're like doing the same thing. They're interchangeable because you only have so many slots, and like
Yeah,
when you go, oh, I really would like to play a third Clara, you're making the concession to say, oh, I'll cut a mana fee because at least I can recur my one mana fee,
yeah.
which is kind of like the decision. I think the other, I don't necessarily agree with the like magma basin point. I think you're fine to play basin even with just two Clara.
Okay,
Because the what ends up happening, at least from my perspective, when you're playing the two mana fees, is you're not forced to play those Clairs early ever.
that's fair.
You're able to hold them more reliably for late game anyway, so it's like a little bit less impactful.
Hmm.
I guess the other card that sort of makes my decision on those is like if I'm going to be a two Sableye or three Sableye gamer. I lean heavily towards three. That was the other thing that I thought was kind of weird in Pedro's list. I think that three is just a lot better, and playing two would definitely force you to play the third Clara, I think, as well.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, and I would probably end up playing three as well, like three Sableye as well. So
Yeah, yeah.
that's a very valid point because I was not considering that, but yeah, that also lends itself to that for sure. And I didn't even dawn on me that he didn't play it. I looked at so many of the other card choices that didn't even look at
Hmm.
the Sableye number, but yeah, I think in Sablezard I'm 100% in on playing three Sableye.
Yeah, I just think that's, I mean, the best part of the deck is that you're able to start attacking with those Sableyes. Your deck is really kind of built around giving you time to do Sableye stuff, and why not play three at that point? It also is like not totally inconsequential to Lost Zone one of them when you're playing two. Like it's a
Yeah.
little bit painful. Again, playing the three Clara does ease that up a little bit. But I mean, I would rather play the three Sable. I like it almost irrelevant whether I'm playing three Clara or not. I think I'd want to play three Sable. The third would
Oh
still
yeah,
be on
no,
the table.
I agree with that. No, I that like again, that's I don't know if I was clear whenever I answered
Yeah,
that
you
question,
are. You are. I was
but
just
yeah,
saying.
Yeah, that's something that's independent of the Clara account. I think I want 3 Sableye because, like you said, I want to be attacking with that like as soon as I'm able to, essentially through the rest of the game, except for where Charizard is cleaning things up. So
Agreed, right?
yeah, I can't imagine wanting to play like I want to play as many of that like that is reasonable from there. And like anytime if I ever have to have like an awkward loss zone in the beginning, like that's always the worst whenever you're playing
Hmm.
only two. And in other versions, like where you're able to clean up with like the Greninja or stuff like that, like it doesn't become as much of an issue because like you have other sniping attacks. But like when that's when that's your main thing, if you ever have to loss zone one, you want the other two. So like
Right,
yeah,
right. Yeah, I agree with that completely, and I think that yeah, having no other spread other than like debatably Hawlucha if you play it is like really, really hurting you if you are ever playing on just one Sableye. It's like doable. I've played Sablezard in previous formats where I only play two Sableye just to like kind of limit test with it, and it works. You get the job done, but there is like a certain deck building element with these decks that's like, what choices do I want to make to put myself into some really awkward loss zone decisions sometimes, and it's like sometimes the answer is play better, and sometimes the answer is like, no, you really just can't avoid that all the time.
yeah. I mean that is always my favorite answer, unfortunately, but I know what you mean. It is not always the actual
Yeah, it's not
answer.
always
So
the answer. It's usually the answer, but it's not always the answer.
yeah, for sure, for sure. Anything else that could kind of go into these lists that you wanted to weigh on before we move on to the next version?
I just want to touch on, I guess, two other things. One of the like the Halucha is in this list, and I think for me it's kind of just standard. I'm playing it in all my versions because the ability to play that and knock out two comfies is too powerful for me to pass up on. I think that's like a flexible spot, especially if you aren't that worried about other Lost Zone matchups. Like you can make the argument that you're a lot more dedicated to Sableye. That's already the best card in those matchups. You're fine. But I would tend to disagree with that. I'd want to play the Halucha, and once I'm playing it, I would want to play at least one copy of Level Ball, debatably two, depending on what other slots I want to make open up for it. It finds all of your cards. If you're not playing any of the Vs, I should lead with that. If you're not playing any of the Vs, it finds all of your cards except for Charizard and Cramorant.
Yeah,
So, not a huge pain there. And then the other thing I wanted to touch on, which I already kind of mentioned, was like your Pokegears. I think that is just an extremely important card. We already touched on wanting to chorus all of your turns. There's points in time where I almost want to play four, honestly. The issue being like you have to play enough supporters to justify it.
yeah,
And finding that balance is hard, but don't when you're making space in your Sablezard list, don't go below two Pokegears, in my opinion. You need that card. You need to find your Claras, and especially if you're not going to play the Forest Seal Stone stuff, fit all of your Pokegears in. Same thing for Lost Vacuum. I think you can get away with one when you're playing Forest Seal Stone because you can go Stone for it, hit my Stone. If not, play two. That's your way to hit more consistent turn two Sableye attacks when you're going second. And if you don't, you have to kind of adjust your game plan to be more greedy and try to get like triple Comfy into rotation and switch between them, which is not as easy as you want it to be.
no, not at all. Yeah, Pokegear is a card that okay, I'm gonna kind of tackle each of your points individually. Like the Halucha, I agree with completely. I was kind of skeptical about the card at first, like because of like not being able to ever pick it up and it just kind of being like stuck there. But
Mm-hmm.
like it's just like the number of times you're able to just like fix some perfect math and in other versions of the deck. In this version, I'm a big fan of that card. I think that, like you said, if even if it was for nothing else, the ability to take not like a two prize turn on two Ralts or two Comfies
Mm-hmm.
is just such a huge swing in momentum. Especially in this version where you're probably giving up the first prize or two before you're able to do anything because you are moving a little bit slower. Just being able to swing that back in your favor is so important. So yeah, I'm a big fan of that.
Just
Um,
one more thing on Halucha,
yeah,
actually, just to chime in on one more reason the card is actually insane. But like we've been talking a lot about, figuring out your mana fee counts. One of the things Halucha also does is let your Sableye just kill a Greninja, which makes your mana fees matter a lot less. So that's
yep,
another way you can kind of make yourself feel a little bit better if you go like single mana fee and play the extra Claras, which also gives you more Pokegear hits. So to your
yep,
next point,
yep.
or to the next point, go ahead.
No, just that. It's Pokegear. I remember seeing an initial list and being like, well, that card's not good. Why are we playing that? Like, just because it's been in standard for so long and we're just not playing it. How could it be good here? And
Hmm.
it took me like 3 games of playing it for me to be like, oh, okay, this is hugely important. It's one of those cards like it's in Goodra as well, and I miss it every time. Like I have to like slim the counts there, and I'm like, well, let's find a cut somewhere else because that card's too important. And like we just said before about how the idea to play like the Forest Seal Stone to get that first turn Clara, like, or sorry, the first turn Chorus, or like Clara in the late game if you get Roxanne, it's just too strong to pass up on. That card is very good. There's no way I wouldn't play 4, and in specifically Sablezard.
Yeah, yeah, I agree completely. I just think that it's too important. Even if you're like not playing much of like a box of supporters, I know some people play Roxanne, some people play none, some people play two,
Yeah.
which is one of the other really varied card counts in the deck. But I mean, even if you're just like, obviously you're playing more supporters in this, but if you're just looking for Chorus and Clara, it's still just those are debatably the two best cards in your deck. One of them is your best early card, one of them is your best late card. So you really want to maximize your ability to see those at all points in the game.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, and like this is probably at this point the most underplayed version of this deck, but I still think like that kind of just shows how much room there is for variance there. And like the reason why I say that is obviously like splitting the stones or what have you, kind of like that could make it break down into additional variants. But like my point is there's Sablezard, and then there's the Greninja versions, and then there's like the big V-Star versions. And that's
Yeah.
kind of how I'm grouping them beyond that. So let's get into some of the stone versions then.
Sure. Yeah.
Because I think that you and I have, like, while we like Sablezard, I think we've probably preferred the ability that Greninja gives us a little bit more of late, because like you're able to just kind of plow through your deck. You're able to hit, like, I know you're a big fan of the turbo version with Forest Seal Stone. I've always preferred the ones with Kyogre too. So like,
Mhm.
just the ability to plow through your deck at that rate of speed. I think Dragonite's, obviously a very impressive card. The ability to have Raikou to tackle, like, it's just an efficient attacker. And now that,
Yeah.
like, I don't know, I think that, do you, like, whether it be, I think we agree on this, but like, and this is one of the things that while they are technically different versions, they also kind of are like the tech choice that you're making there. Are you ever tempted to really split the stones, or at this point are you all in
No.
on just playing? Yeah, I didn't
Just
think
Forest
so.
Seals. I do see them as the same deck, I guess, at this point, because
Yeah,
from my perspective, it's just whether you want to put a Sky Seal Stone into your kind of more combo based Lost Box list. But I don't think that it's almost ever correct to make that choice. Um, the matchup where it's like really, really impactful is Mew, and I just think you need to find a different game plan there. You're already pretty favored in the matchup anyway. So, just keep doing what you do. Play a Drape if you want to. Um, do good Sableye math. Map your prizes out. Play Kyogre if that's your angle. Whatever it is, like it's a matchup that Lost Box is pretty good in right now. That's one of the things that I wouldn't worry about. And I don't think that like Sky Seal is helping in any of your other difficult matchups. Like you don't need it to make the Miraidon matchup better on the Regieleki. You don't need it for like Gudras. It's hard to kill Gudras. That's one of your bad matchups, and your Sky Seal's not really helping you there. You don't play anything that can make that okay, really, right? I mean,
yeah,
unless you
no.
do like some insane multi-switch play and they left a couple damage on, it's just not happening. And then Lugia, it is still good against Lugia, but Lugia is leaving less Lugia V stars for you to knock out. You're playing the matchup a lot less, so the Sky Seal's just not as good as often. So no, I'm just out on it. But I do consider them to be the same deck. I think it's just whether you want to put Sky Seal in your deck, and I actually think it's too big of a hit to your consistency anyway to cut one of your Forest Seal Stones. It's just the big issue with Lost Box that didn't feel like it was going to happen is that it just is a lot clunkier. The nets did matter a lot, especially for hitting
Yeah.
early counts of Lost Zone cards, and just for getting more comfies off turn one. It's often the difference between comfying 2 or 3 times turn one versus 4 or 5 times,
Yep.
and that's a lot. Like that's 4 cards that you don't see in both of those situations, right? Which is a lot of cards to find your first chorus. It's a lot of cards to find your VIP pass turn one or whatever it is that you need to chain into. And that makes a big difference. So having more of these V-Star powers to just search your deck for the right card, it's important. It's a big deal.
Yeah, I think that it's also like, and like this doesn't matter in every matchup, but like it's also the difference. Like there's a lot of times where like in last form where you'd be able to get like 5 or 6 cards turn one, and then like still be able to poke with Cramorant. Now you're often choosing between finishing on like 3 or finishing on like 5 or 6, and like the difference is if you finish with, or not 5, like 5, but if you're doing 5, you're probably not getting that Gram poke in, and that's like that can go a long way in terms of like especially like if you're like going against Mew and you're like trying to like set up damage to like I want to poke this Genesect so that I'm able to like kind of sprinkle damage here later or stuff like that.
Mhm.
Like it definitely limits your consistency in terms of output. How many Forest Steel Stones would you be playing at this point? Because I've seen some people playing two, some people playing three. Where do you land on that?
I've been playing 2 in my lists. I haven't felt a real need to go to 3, but I'm kind of a believer in playing some more consistency cards in the deck, whether that's playing Trekking Shoes or playing Pokestop over Beach Court. I just want to play some other options to dig through my deck rather than play more Forest Seal Stones, since they can be kind of bricky and clumpy.
Yeah, well, that was going to be that's why I was asking because I'm trying to find exactly which because Andrew Hedrick, who I think has won 2 regionals this year
Mhm.
with Lugia, was he had 2 of the 3 tops with the split stone build, and he was playing a 2-1 split, so he was not necessarily cutting back on like a forest seal stone, but you had to have to probably assume that
You're
there is some
factoring in that that's still going to be a card, most likely, that's adding to the consistency of your deck, right?
correct.
I mean,
That's
even
what I
something
was.
as
Yeah,
simple that's like is an energy sometimes, especially if you're like kind of greedy on an energy count. Like your energies are consistency cards sometimes when you have Greninja. Like
yep.
there's just most things are gonna make. I mean, not most things. Literally everything will make your deck more consistent than a force or a Sky Seal Stone. The card does not advance your game state. It doesn't help you set up. It does change prize math, which is obviously a broken ability. That is an extremely powerful card. So don't take that the wrong way. But I think the main issue for these decks is really getting to the point where you're performing your game plan rather than finding the tech options to actually win matchups.
Well, I already made a liar myself because found one of the 2 lists that he topped with, and it was a 1-1 split. But yeah, so yeah, it is just like it is a weird list to look at for anyone who has not seen any of these lists yet. It's looks like a typical like what you're looking at from the turbo version where you're playing the Dragonite V, the Raikou V, Drapion V. You're playing the Greninja. You're playing the Beach Courts, all the switch cards you can look for. 2 Lost Vacuums, 2 Pokegears, but then also a 1-1 split of the stones. And I don't like you're still playing what? That's 9 energy, so that's probably enough. He's playing Snorlax as well, which
Okay.
I like. I like. It's just so weird to me that I think I would like this list significantly more if it was just a second Forest Seal Stone,
Hmm.
because I want to be able to do like the whole thing on turn 1 where I'm getting 7. Like that should not be unreasonable in a deck like this, where the other version does it most every turn. Like turn 1 going second, turn 2 going first. So yeah, I don't know. I think that I think it's a little bit too cute. I think it's like obviously when it's good, like you're only gonna remember the games where it won you the game as opposed
Right.
to the game where you started it and you weren't able to go off. And whenever it spikes, like obviously taking a 4 prize turn is enormous, but
Yeah. I mean, I
I
think
don't
from
know.
like testing it in both directions, that's going to have a massive confirmation bias. You're going to remember the games that you hard bricked within your hand and the games where you got to beat Mew the cool way where they can never Roxanne you.
Yep.
And you're not going to remember the in between games where it just either didn't matter or where it was like a minor liability.
Yeah.
But I think that's something that's like interesting that you kind of mentioned before is how much worse Cramorant is now in these decks, and you
Hmm.
see like a wide range of numbers in these. I've actually gotten to the point where I'm just playing one in a lot of my lists. It's just really hard to weave in, and like you do have multiple Clairs in most of these now, so you are able to like recur it if you wanted to kind of poke with it over the course of a game if you're like hitting some kind of clunkier draws. Um, but like as far as the Pokemon go, we are at the point where like I think every list plays Raikou and Dragonite, which I think is good. I think those cards are both good. I think Drapion is the only other V you should even consider in these lists. And to me, the choice to play that card comes down to whether you're a Kyogre list or not. Does that still ring true to you?
Yeah, 100%. That like, and I've liked the versions that play Kyogre. I've liked the single prize version that only plays like the single prize
Hmm.
only plays Kyogre because like I understand how people can like if you haven't played it where you think you need the Drapion to beat Mew, and if you don't play Kyogre, I might actually agree with that. But if you do, like you can just set up so many things where like it's not that hard to take 4 prizes off of a Kyogre, and like you're flying through your deck anyway. Like it's just it's actually like it seems like the kind of gimmick that would not actually be real, but it's like
No,
whenever you're if you draw anywhere near reasonable, it should happen most
the
times.
Kyogre thing is so funny because I remember at the beginning of Lost Origin, it was like an online phenomenon. Like people were just obsessed with Kyogre and online events, and it never made its way to paper in that format. Probably because that in that format specifically, Lost Tina was actually good, and you were already beating Mew just by doing Drapion and Tina's V Star.
Yeah,
And At the time, like we didn't bother to test that version ever, and we just kind of memed on it a lot. And then as soon as we played it, it was like, oh no, this is actually just extremely good and very easy to do. You're
Yeah.
asking so little, and it actually is awesome.
It was one
So
of those things that kind of rolled through, like, and obviously our anecdotal experiences through our locals, but like, it was one of those things that the second one person tried it, and I can't. It was like you and I testing on the side, and the second one of us tried it, we're like, oh, and then like our friend group looked at it, and they're like, that's a joke, right? And then they looked at it, like, oh, I see it now. And then like someone signed up with it for a local, and it's like, why would you be playing that? And then you play against, it, you're like, I get it.
right,
So
yeah.
it's like,
The second someone takes 4 prizes with it, you go,
and like you think
mhm.
it's gonna be impossible to take 4 prizes, or it's like it's not gonna happen all that often. It's gonna happen like 1 out of every 10 games, and it's like it happens every time your deck works. Like
Mhm.
which is almost every game. Like as long as your opponent's not disrupting you with the consistent judges or whatever, you probably get there.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm a big fan of that
I'm a big
of like
fan of
any
the
version like that.
Kyogre, and I also think that it lets you do echoing horn things, which is really important for beating Goodra, I feel, because that's one of the
Yeah,
matchups that's really hard for this deck. It's just too thick,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it
yeah, yeah.
kills most of your cards.
Yeah, it's like I think that if there is a version that's good into Goodra, I think it could be that one. Like the
Mhm.
Charizard has some merit as well, obviously, but
Yeah, with
I
cross
I
switchers, you have a lot of switches, and you can actually kind of fight around it.
Yeah, but I think that the Kyogre, like if I was going to be signing up with a version like this, like whether be playing Stones or not, I would be playing Kyogre, I think.
I agree.
So that kind of wraps our thoughts up on for the Forest Seal version, and like essentially anything that is like a more dedicated like Lost Box without like a specific like evolution into things. Because like even though like Tina and Goo are Lost Zone decks and Comfy decks, they're different, right? Like they have a lot of the same engine, but like you map out your game
Goo is
differently.
different. Goo is significantly different.
That's fair.
I
That's fair.
think Tina is very similar to a regular, right? It's very similar to the Force Seal decks in that
Yeah.
it's because like it's just trying to establish a big attacker. Its big attacker happens to be Giratina instead of Dragonite, or getting cute with like Kyogre, or the Raikou or whatever. And I think the biggest reason, even though it had decent online results, like Tina is just too linear for
Yeah.
starters and plays too many bricks compared to these other decks. Like, to just quickly gloss over Tina, because it is the real version that we're not really touching on. Everything that we've said about the other about Force Seal Lost Box, about Greninja Lost Box in general, kind of applies to it from like a deck building perspective. Except instead of getting to play these Force Seals and extra consistency cards, you have to play a bunch of Giratinas, and I do not see the payoff in that. I think the results of like a major tournament bore out that way, and I don't give a damn if it does well online. It's not worth it. Don't play Tina.
Well, I think you actually probably nailed to me what is the most important part, right? In the sense that I think that deck is better than decks that are not like tier one. Like I think that still the Lost Zone cards are going to do good things. I think that being able to like Giratina's V-Star attack is very good. Having Shred is good, but I don't think it necessarily does anything better than what the Sealstone decks do. So if I'm going to play literally the same 48, 52 cards, and I don't think it does the same thing better, why would I play that? And I think that that's what is always the issue for me. You could say that it's cooler, and I mean,
It's
Giratina
not
is one of my
cooler.
favorite.
You're wrong.
I was gonna say Giratina is one of my favorite Pokemon. So like, if I'm not going to tell you I think it's cooler, I think that kind of tells you exactly where it is, because I want
Yeah.
that to be the answer, and it just isn't. So
Right. Right. Yeah,
yeah,
it's a little disappointing. I mean, because Guillotine is cool, and when I very first started testing the format, and something that is true, it's like harder to get to those amounts in your Lost Zone. So very early in my online testing, I was using is it Abyss Seek or whatever the first attack on Guillotine is, to
yeah,
both get myself a little more set up and get some more cards in my Lost Zone. And very early on, that felt okay, but the format has since become a little more streamlined. Decks have gotten better, and now it's just too dangerous to leave a 2 prize Giratina V in your active, and then to really enact your game plan. That means you had to bench 2 of them. So now we're asking for a lot out of setup, and yeah, it's a fine deck, and I think you can take most of what we said about Forest Lost Box and maybe a decent bit about what we say as far as like the setup angle goes for Gudra and apply it to Tina, but I don't think it needs a whole deep dive by comparison.
yeah, and that's the main reason. Like, other than the fact, like, I know we rag on that deck all the time, but that's actually not why we are skipping over it. Essentially, we're skipping over it because to us it falls in a similar vein. So, but getting into Goo, because I think Goo does play quite differently,
Yeah, I think Gu has
and
a unique game plan.
Yeah, so Goo's been my favorite deck of the format to play so far, so I've definitely played that more than anything, but I'm bringing up my current list as well. Um, it's like at this point, I feel like most of it is pretty decided upon where you're playing like the 3/3 Goo, the 4 Comfy, Greninja, 1 Cram, some number of Drapion, which we will get to in a moment. The only from there, the flex numbers are like, are you going to play an energy recycler? Are you going to play some? How many Pokegear are you playing? What's your exact switch count? Which stadiums? And a couple of like the support. There's a couple different supporters you could argue over, and if you want to play V-Guard energy, does that kind of summarize the differences between the variations of the decks as like an overview?
Yeah, I think there's a small bit more. It's funny because like I do agree that when I look at lists, they're pretty standardized, honestly, for this deck. But at the same
Yeah,
time, like I think you can make an argument for which stadium you play. I
yeah,
think like there's a lot of consistency card debates that you can have between Pokegears, Ultra Ball counts, Nest Ball counts, whether you want to play Heavy Ball, your energy count versus playing Recycler versus just not even worrying about it, your Mirage Gate count. Like, there's a lot of very small, tweaky things you can talk about for the list. But I think like the greater overall deck construction is like kind of set in stone, which doesn't really sound like it sounds like I'm saying gibberish when I listen to myself right now. So I guess do you want to just kind of start talking about the list and your thoughts on
yeah,
the deck?
yeah. So I like that we've gotten back to the place where it's become a Melanie deck because I felt like throughout a lot of last format it wasn't, and play like all lists are essentially playing two Melanie, and they're a lot of times they're debating on if they're going to play a third or a Raihan. I don't really think that you can play just two Melanie and neither of an additional. Um, but it's just it's very nice that you're able to kind of like in the early game you're able to tank and like yes you give up maybe an early prize, but you're not in the same rush to get to 7. You're basically just trying to get off that turn 2 attack with the Gudra, which is like it's a nice change of pace from something that is a similar engine. Um, yeah, so I like this also more than a lot of Lost decks because you're able to play 3 boss, which is not something a lot of Lost decks can play, and just being
Mhm.
able to cherry pick your prizes differently. Like obviously Sableye lets you cherry pick your prizes in a different way, but like it just gives you so much control over the board, and not over the board, but like over like the way the game plan goes. And like
Mhm.
obviously Moisture Star is such a like strong V Star power, just being able to like literally soak up entire like turns of action is just like so strong in a deck in a format that is very tempo based. It feels like right now. So yeah, um, where did you end up landing on that? I know we talked about it some offline. Were you were you more of a Raihan person or a third Melanie, or where are you at with that?
Yeah, so I started off as a first off, you need to play three. That's for sure has been
Yes.
my takeaway. Whether and you need to play at least two Melanie. So whether you're playing two Melanie and a Raihan or three Melanie, that's a separate question.
Yep.
And you certainly can play three Melanie and the Raihan. I don't think like three is the exact number. You just need to play at least three.
Mhm.
Right now, I'm playing two Melanie, one Raihan,
Okay.
and last we talked about it, I was kind of off of Raihan, and I did finally build Goo to play some more with it.
Ooh.
Um, and I've been playing a decent number of games online with it, and I think there's enough situations where you can turn the game with the Raihan that it's worth playing. I also found that there's a decent amount of matchups where I really want to put an energy either on Greninja or I hate to go into like a tech card already, but like or the Articuno if you play Paralyzed Articuno,
I was getting there. Yeah.
where I think the Raihan is really good, and like I was playing the Raihan already. I also, and I know we're going to talk about the Drape count a little more too. I don't like playing three of them or two of them, but I do think, especially if you're only going to play the one, you really need to play the Raihan so that you can either use it to clear path or use that to make sure you find the Drape when you need it. And it also can like be used to power up the Drape if there's path in play and you don't have a stadium left or whatever. So I think the Raihan has come around to me, and I think the package that you most commonly see with Raihan is playing the V-Guard energy. Um, I've kind of come around on playing V-Guard with the Raihan as well. I do like it in the deck only because the mirror match math is good. Um, Even if they have choice belt, they're still three shotting you, which I think is a really big deal. And for that same reason, like I've actually cut my choice belt for right now because I feel like in the mirror they're going to V guard up, and against most other decks, I'm kind of okay with playing the attrition game.
So as you
Um,
say, you're playing no V Guard energy.
I'm playing V guard no belt right now.
I'm sorry, I misspoke. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so I initially cut it down to one belt when I fit V-Guard and stuff in, and I had not found the place, like, what to cut yet for, like, cut belt for, but I also am not playing Articuno yet, and I wanted to test that, and I haven't gotten there yet, so.
Yeah, so I'm still kind of considering putting it back in, but it just feels so like it's kind of just random when you're playing one, and I found that not often if I was like setting my goo up did I want to Raihan for choice belt. Because the belt is good when I'm like in other matchups when I'm able to like proactively boss. But like if that means I can't Raihan for belt and then boss their stuff up to chase down, Tyrannitars or Miraidons or whatever off their bench. Well, that doesn't, you know what I mean? 220
I
guys.
know, but like that's what like I kept landing on Miraidon, and like for the longest time I was having the Defiance band in there because like it is like you're giving up the prize in the early
Mhm.
game, and I like a lot of, like I understand why belt is generally better because if you get like if you actually set up on turn two and you're able to attack like an unevolved Arceus or an unevolved like, but like a lot of the times 200 is enough,
Mhm.
or like you can like play around it. So yeah, I think I like that. That
When
makes
I was
sense.
kind of working backwards, where it was like, okay, what matchups do I care about? And then it was like, it doesn't really help against Guardy, which is one of the harder matchups in my experience from
Yeah,
the number of games I've played. And it's like,
yeah,
well, Belt's not good there, so it's only good if you again have it and can proactively like chase down bench Zacians. But once you hit like the mid to late game, they don't need to bench it ahead of time, right? They just play it and power it up. So it's like
yep,
very early if you drew Belt, you could like Belt, boss their Zacian, take a bunch of prizes, kind of swing the game that way.
yeah,
But I found that kind of felt like it's the wrong way to approach the matchup because like you would definitely want to play multiple belts for that, and I just don't think it's good enough anywhere except for the mirror. But only if they don't have V Guard. It's
yeah.
really good in the mirror because it turns your Gudra attack into a two shot on their Gudra. But if they have the V Guard, then it's not. It doesn't change the math at all if they have the V Guard. So I don't know. I mean, I'm definitely not against playing it. I'm also not against playing Defiance Band or playing like a 1-1 split if you can fit them. But that's kind of things that I had shied away from in the deck.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. So we touched on it already. I'm starting with the Pokemon because that way we can kind of sequentially go through what a deck list would look like. You said you were off to Drapion, and like I said, I started with two, and then the more that like Mew is just essentially like cutting a lot of the stadiums and just going four path
Yeah,
and
just
saying
one
have it,
path.
then like I think that the one is fine, and I like actually kind of playing with other things because you're able to like I don't know. I don't think the second one is really all that good.
And there
Do
is
you
the
like the
argument that I think we talked about this on the show last week actually, but there is the argument that like you can go attach Gate, Melanie, or Raihan and just power it up right there, right? You are able to make that line, which is something to think about with Drape, especially if you're interested in playing too. Um, but from my perspective, and you've probably played the matchup more than me, especially for Gudra, it's pretty easy to chase Genesect. So like my perspective on the matchup is that I'm trying to just goo down some bench Genesects and eventually take the Drapion knockout on the Mew. Like I know I'm playing
yeah
a 7 prize game, but and then that could change if Goo continues to see increased play because right now you can do that because Mew doesn't play Orcorio.
yeah
But Mew is allowed to put Orcorio back in, and then Goo either doesn't one shot or now you need Belt in that matchup too.
uh yes and no, right? Like, I mean, if they play that, if you like, you can. And this sounds terrible, but bear with me. Like, you can actually then boss just the Orc Oreo instead of
In the
bossing the
arguments
Genesect.
that then the
It's a
Drapion is
six
still
prize
game.
game.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it like I don't actually like. It just makes you have to prioritize differently, or it makes it so you have to have the boss like to do it first. Like so, like I mean, yes, it forces a more linear like you have to choose to do it gameplay, but like I don't think it actually necessarily changes any of the math throughout the
No,
totality of the
no, and
game.
I do agree with that point as well. You're right as far as that goes, but it also is like, and this isn't what this episode is about, but like then you're leaving the Mew player with their Genesect versus killing it Genesect, right?
Yeah,
Which
yeah, yeah,
is
yeah.
which is impactful every time. When you start your turn with 3 Genesects in play versus 2, you're able to make different decisions and you're more likely to hit every time, right?
Mhm.
Um, Ignoring like the attrition aspect of that means after you killed the first two and now it's down to the Mew phase of the game. They only have 2 Genesects at most if they didn't prize or discard any to find their Roxanne path play.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think that would be something like you said. That's not necessary for this episode, but it is something we would have to
Yeah,
do
yeah,
further down.
exactly. It's interesting though, but I mean, I think that um, I think that the second Drapion's. I mean, it obviously is helping a lot in the matchup, but like I feel like so often you're gonna have to manually set it up that I really don't value to.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So the only other Pokemon, like we said, like I know I've seen somebody who plays Amazon. I don't think that one's worth really
No,
discussing
I
at
don't think
this
that's
point.
real.
But
My
the Articuno might be.
my question for you before we go to the
Yeah.
Articuno, because it is like real techie. How have you felt about Cramorant? It's been in my deck the whole time. I've attacked with it once, I think, and I
Um,
haven't played a ton of games, but like it doesn't feel very good to me. Do you just have to play one? Is there just like enough spots where that's going to help you clean up math because the Gudra doesn't one shot things, or
yeah, it
what?
allows you to kind of like clean things up. It allows you to set things up necessarily in the early game. Like if they aren't going to just into like the things like the Miraidons or there's other things where I've found where, or like even in the mirror where you're like able to take early one shots because like yes, you can tank it in Lost Box, but like especially if it's like you don't want to give them every single freaking
Yeah,
turn,
for
right?
sure.
So kind of like it's more board control than it is actually like building towards your end game in those kind of matchups. So I like
Mhm.
that. Or like into guard while you're still setting up, trying to hit the numbers to actually get your Gudra set up or whatever. Like it allows you to kind of exist in the early game and like pick your spots. So
Yeah, it makes
it
sense.
is very mediocre.
In theory, against Guard, you should be able to like rope and kill a Ralts a lot of the time. My Gardevoir opponents all open double VIP pass Fog Crystal every game, so that's never once happened in my life. But I do believe that it's technically possible.
Yeah, no, I hear you. That why would they open anything less? That's the best testing.
Absolutely, knowing that you are never. Dude, this is not a joke. Just quick caveat. You know how many games online I played against Guardy where they have literally had 4 cards left in deck game two or turn two?
Yeah, I mean it's actually insanity.
It how? Anyways, but to get to the Articuno, so as we kind of just touched on, I do think one of the harder matchups is Gardevoir. It's one of the decks that can hit the numbers to actually kill the Gudra. It is not giving you a lot of prizes very consistently because obviously, like all these cards are one prizes except for the Guardy EX and the Zacian. The Guardy EX is too big for you to kill reliably. So there's definitely some problems in that matchup, and I do think the Articuno goes a long way in clearing the gap there, especially like with the Raihan, or if you play a little more aggressively towards setting up your Mirage Gate. Because, like, to use Tordsless as an example, Penny's the only card that can pivot anything out of your active once it's up there.
Yep.
You can't penny up the Gardevoir EX, and the Articuno can just soften it up so that you can kill it.
Yep.
Um, which is really powerful, actually, and that's one of the only ways that you can, like, really lock cards up against that deck because everything else is a basic. But even like a one prize guardian or a Curly, like you can still just lock it there. That gives you some time to set up, and it basically is a free prize.
Yeah. I like it. I want to test it. It's not as like commonplace at this point, but I just feel like it does add something. And I think if I don't like it could it's one of those things that your bad matchups are often not like they're not bad because like you can do nothing against them. It's because you don't have enough time to do the stuff against them.
Mm-hmm.
So giving yourself that extra time really could actually go a long way. It is awkward in the sense that it's not like you can power it up quickly. It's not like you can like Melanie to it.
Yeah,
Like
but it's attached Mirage Gate or attached
yeah,
Raihan. You know.
yeah. So it's not impossible. I'm going to. That's one card that I have not tested yet. I also actually you don't think I own one, so I will not be playing it.
I actually don't know if I own one either. It's funny you say that.
I have to see if the store has one, and I assume they won't, so I'll have to order it. So I will not be testing it necessarily in person very soon, but it is something I'm going to try to mess with online because the card is very like it was format warping in a sense last form because like of how strong paralysis
Yeah,
was
it demanded
before preparing
respect.
for it. So if I can give a deck that I already think is well positioned that extra added layer of demanding respect, then I think that it's in a really good position.
Yeah, and to go with that, I still think the deck is already pretty solid against Lugia. Like the math works out decently, though. That's one of the matchups where like you can argue that Choice Belt is very good, but um, again, just playing the one doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But Articuno is still very good against them. It's funny that they're the deck that's better positioned to play against it as I see Thornton become more and more common.
Yeah,
But it's still you force them to have something to deal with it.
yeah,
And it is again one of the only ways you can like reliably turn the Gardevoir matchup around in like a certain turn, because once they're set up, like the two things that seem to really matter in that matchup from my perspective are if you can go really fast and Greninja their bench, or if you can find a way to deal with that Gardevoir as 2 prizes, because they're not gonna give the only time they're offering you 2 prizes is when their Zacian takes 2 or 3 prizes back from you.
yeah.
So you need to find ways to take multi-prize turns there when they're not at least getting 2 prizes on the back end as well. And the Articuno lets you do that. There's some argument to say that Drape lets you do that too in the matchup,
Yeah,
but like you're
yeah.
still forced to like boss. That one's just like harder, right? Because if you boss it up, then you have to have like gate to get there. Um, so I don't know. But I don't think there's anything else to talk about Pokemon wise. I think
I don't
that
either.
really those are your options. You can play two Drape if you wanted to. You can play Articuno if you wanted to. I think don't play two Cramorant. Just to touch on something that used to be pretty common, I don't see it very often anymore. You think it's insane to play two Goodra V3 V Star, right?
I've never liked that. I don't know
Yeah.
if insane's the right word, but I've never particularly cared for it. So especially like I don't know. I think that you're just like you're trying to be a little bit too cute. You're not going to actually ever really like
Way
I
too
don't know what
cute.
you'd have to give me an exact example of what you're cutting it for and why that is so much better than actually having the consistency of setting up in a deck
Mhm.
that like you want to like you have time but like not that much. So yeah, no, I would not play two.
I'm just even if you get to that point, I feel like the onus is now on you to explain to me why playing like 2-3 is better than playing like an extra copy of Ultra Ball or something. Which I know
Yep.
there is obviously a cost to, but there's also a bigger range there. So
Well, the issue is oftentimes it feels like they don't do to play an extra copy of that. It's to play something else that's kind of a little bit tacky, and it's like at that point, then like, what are we really like?
well,
What are you
that's my
doing?
point as far as like why are we cutting a Goodra V and like you know what I mean? It just
Yeah.
doesn't make much sense to me. The last Pokemon I'll reference, which went with saying an extra Ultra Ball, it's gone back and forth in the deck where people used to play Luminion last format, and I haven't kept up deeply with Goodra lists. Do you think there's any merit to playing Luminion in this deck, or you just off it? You don't want to give up more two prizers other than Goodra?
I'm not like
Off
I
it
could.
is again a strong word, but like you
Yeah,
lean towards it not being worth it.
yeah. I haven't felt the need to actually get it back in there because, and like I said, I like some number of Poke Gear in here, and I think that that's sufficient to like kind of fill a similar niche.
Fair enough. You want to move on to the trainer, son?
Yeah, let's do that. So, supporter count, like we said, four Coldest Experiment, three boss, three energy get back cards,
Mm-hmm.
whether it be I'm currently, like I said, I'm with you where it's currently two Melanie and a Raihan and a Roxanne. I think Roxanne, like every time I play a Lost Box deck, I want to get fit Roxanne in there because it is so strong, and this one actually like can easily afford time for it and just be super punishing whenever you're also like like if you're ever in a situation where you're like reduce with or like heal with moisture straw and then do it, like you just put them on such a clock that like, hey, I only have to take like one or two more knockouts, you're not getting there in time. So that's where I'm at on my supporter count with two Poke Gear. Does that sound about right to you?
Yeah, I'm in the exact same spot, same Pokegear count and everything. I've played every number between 0 and 2 Pokegear. I haven't played more. Just too hard to fit in so far for me. Um, I know the last format at some point, I think 2 Roxanne was pretty standard in this deck. I don't feel like I can fit it right now, but would you like to fit those in if you could? Is that something you're like
Um,
actively thinking about, or is this just like you get one?
Probably closer to that. I like would I like to be like I just don't see a world where we're realistically resolving it twice unless like we get to a place where the Sky Steel becomes pretty relevant and they find something like if there's something that I don't know about like that we have not figured out yet that it actually like tilts Sky Steel in that matchup because then I'd want to be able to like actually realistically like tilt them back off of that. But
Mhm.
otherwise, like until then, I don't see where you're weaving in a second one.
Okay.
Because once you get to the end game, you're probably going to get to do it once to try to give yourself time, but then from there you're like bossing multiple times. You're not actually going to be able to disrupt all that
Right.
often.
Right.
So yeah, I don't like I like it, but I don't think it's really all that necessary.
Makes sense to
Uh,
me. And
are
I
you
don't.
playing?
Go
No,
ahead.
go ahead.
No, I was just
No,
saying, I don't think
please.
there's any other supporters to really even consider in here. Do you?
No, and there's nothing else that like I mean, no, I wouldn't think so. Like I yeah. And then I'm playing. Are you playing three Mirage Gate?
I am. That was one of the other cards that I wanted to touch on a little bit. I think
Yeah.
partially for me, this goes hand in hand with playing the Raihan to power up the Articuno or even like Greninja in some situations if you're able to just like get a cheeky attach off on it earlier.
Hmm.
I think that's the Greninja, awkwardly enough, can swing a lot of matchups too. Like I mentioned against Guardy, that's one of the big things to me that lets you swing the matchup. And it does make me kind of want to play for Mirage Gate. Um, but like when you're already playing 3 energy acceleration supporters and you have to dedicate like more of your game plan to getting 7 cards in your lost zone if you want to go lean into the Mirage Gate, it's tough. Like there's certainly a meta game where I would do it where I'm like all in on beating Gardevoir, especially where it's like I need to play to my Greninja and my Articuno. But right now, I feel like just playing the Articuno is already like giving a lot of deference to the deck to the point where I don't think you need to go ham and play the fourth gate, though you could convince me that the Articuno MLS is supposed to be the fourth gate.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the swing spot, right? Because like you don't like Greninja's obviously insane in Lost Box and can like spin back some matchups, but like you're already pretty good into that anyway.
Most places where it's good, you're favored. It's just Guardy.
Yeah, so if I would, that's why I want to try the Articuno first
Mhm.
and see how I like it in there, and see if that like actually swings it enough in your favor. And then if not, I would probably come back to considering something like a fourth Mirage Gate.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was at, and I haven't. I put the Articuno in, and I really like it in theory, but I haven't drawn it in the matchup ever. Let's talk about like the setup ball search cards. Like we're playing two Pokegear as like a setup card that obviously is closer to a supporter, but for your other setup cards, I guess 4 VIP passes just standard at this point in the deck. I think 3 Nest Ball really is the number, though I've seen anywhere from 2 to 4. Do you have any, you know, opinion there? Or do you think? Go ahead.
I'm on 2 and I want to fit a third.
Okay,
So,
I guess this is probably the next one. How many Ultra Ball are you playing?
2.
All right, I'm only playing 1 Ultra Ball, so
No, I mean
That-
I'm
that
not
could be
opposed
it.
to switching that out. Yeah, it's
um,
easy enough.
yeah. So I was playing 3 and 2 for a while, but I felt like the cost is pretty high in this deck. Actually, you don't build up cards in your hand insanely well, and the likelihood of you finding your Goodra V Star, even if you're like, sometimes you are just melonying and going, I hope I draw it, but you see enough cards from your deck, especially when you're doing comfy stuff, like you find it normally.
Yeah.
I'm not against playing 2 Ultra Ball, but 1 has kind of worked out fine for me. And then I noticed pretty much nobody plays Hisuian Heavy Ball. Are you playing it?
I'm not right now.
Is that a card that you would like to fit in? I guess from my perspective, it goes back to what I said about the Articuno and the Greninja.
Yeah.
Like, there's enough matchups where those cards are really good. Especially, I'm only playing the 1 Drapion. If you're playing 2, that where like I kind of do want to fit the Heavy Ball in, but it felt like
Yeah.
it was that or my second Pokegear.
To me, at this point, like it's about how good is the Articuno, because like realistically, I'd only be playing. I guess you could say, like you said, you could be playing it for the Drapion, but realistically, you're only playing it for the Greninja, and like obviously that's really good, but like I don't know if that makes me want to cut the Pokegear down. But like if Articuno also seems like it's as good as it does in theory, then you could start to sway me into thinking that let's kind of tweak things around so I can get in there. Because like I'm with you, where like a lot of decks like over the last year or however long it's been since the Hisuian Heavy Ball has come out, like I immediately want it in there because it is such a good card. So yeah, I'm not opposed to it. I just haven't fit it in yet.
And I guess there's some argument that like the 3rd Nest Ball, or in your case the 2nd Ultra Ball, could also be the Heavy Ball.
Yeah.
So like there's, if
There's spots.
you have to like see how you feel about the ball search, I guess, what spot makes the most sense. Like it's probably the most analogous to the Nest Ball, since you are getting basics with it. You have a bunch of copies of those, so they're the most likely to be prized.
Yep.
I don't know. So, but I mean, I think that's really it. It's 1 to 2 Ultra Ball, somewhere in the 2 to 4 Nest Ball range. Maybe you play Heavy Ball, play 4 VIP Pass. How's your Switch count? What's your feeling there?
I'm currently at 4 Escape Rope, and I just went down to 3 Switch. I want to find the 4th one in there, but it's like there's a bunch of cards I want in that last slot, like we've been talking about. So, which like this is not a Switch count, but it kind of is. It brings us to the stadiums as well.
Sure, yeah.
What is your stadium count, or what?
I'm playing the same switches as you right now. I'm playing 4 rope, 3 switch, 2 beach court.
So I was trying the Crystal Cave because I wanted to see if, because I've seen it enough with people playing it. So that immediately made me miss the 4th switch, and I have yet to find where I actually like I maybe in the mirror, but like it's not actually good in the mirror because like then they're using it too.
Right,
I don't know.
Doesn't make a lot of sense.
I don't think Crystal Cave is really all that good. And that was gonna be one of the questions we got to when we kind of got there through the Switch information, but. I have yet to find the reason. I wish somebody could tell me the math, because maybe I'm just dumb, but I just have not found the reason to play it.
I haven't played it, but in theory I didn't come up with any reasons that I like to play it. The thing that I do want to talk about as far as the switches go, like we kind of mentioned some matchups where you would like want to play the full 4 Mirage Gate, and I think if you feel that the 4th gate is really important, I think that playing another switch is something that you might want to do to facilitate that a little bit more. I also think that once you decide that Mirage Gate is more important, that's another, like, you can't cut Pokegear anymore. You need to find your choruses if you believe there's enough matchups where early Mirage Gates are relevant. One of the nice things, if you go heavier on Melanie, especially if you don't play Raihan, is how easy it is to set up your Goodras without needing your Mirage Gates, so you can kind of hedge that way. It's weird because it sounds like you're talking about like the consistency engine of the deck, but like these things are good in different spots. And
Yeah,
that's kind of the interesting part about building this deck to me. Like it's all engine, but it's what way do you want your engine to work in different matchups?
yeah,
Um,
certainly.
and then I guess to move on to the stadiums, because I don't have much else to say about the trainers. The only other trainer that I guess has any merit is the energy recycler. We already kind of touched on the belt band situation. Are you playing recycler? I know at some point you were.
I am right now, and it's because of how often I found myself using Greninja that I wanted to be able to have the option to use Greninja without actually like. And this is before I was playing Raihan.
Mhm.
Like without actually limiting myself in terms of other options. I found like too often to get in the game I was having to Greninja and then like actually get attack with Greninja. So you're just
Mhm.
wasting so many energies that I would run out in the late game. That could just be like get better with the deck, and then it ends up coming out.
Now, what's
But
your
I have
energy count look like then to go with that?
yeah, 6 water, 5 metal, and
V-Guard.
1 V guard.
Okay,
So.
so I'm playing 7 water, 5 metal V guard. I'm playing one more energy instead of the
And that,
recycler,
yeah, I could totally get on board with that too.
and that was mostly because of the Articuno at the end of the day, since it's another double water attack. And I just felt
Yeah,
like that was I do just in general not really like playing energy recycler.
I know.
For a lot of reasons, like it is just actually a crap card.
Yeah.
But when you play Kyogre, it's worth it. When you play a ton of Mirage Gates, it can be worth it.
Mhm.
It's another like if I went to 4 gate, you would probably see me cut my 7th water energy for a recycler as well.
Yeah, I haven't gone up to 7 water yet. Like that, I might actually try that just because to see if like I find like any sort of diminishing or anything like that without playing the recycler. Like I said,
Mhm.
I think that at this point, while I'm like I've obviously played the deck a ton, like in other formats, but I still find myself really learning it. And until I
Mhm.
like actually get fully comfortable with it, I'm giving myself the crutch. That's probably not the right way to handle
No,
it.
that's
But here
fine.
we are.
I also think, again, I mentioned this kind of in passing about regular Lost Box. Like energies are draw cards when you have Greninja in play, so it's not the worst to just have another energy in your deck over a card that's recycling energies. Um, there's like things that obviously change that math around, but it is what it is, and I have not found too badly that I'm flooding on energies. I think if I cut one, it would be the V guard before anything else, but I do like that math in the mirror.
Yeah.
Um, so let's talk other stadiums though, because I think there are three options that you can really play. And we already talked about Beach Court, and I guess you kind of covered Cave. You're not very impressed with it either. In theory, it didn't make a lot of sense to me. Have you tried Temple of Sinnoh?
It's the next one I wanted to try for
Okay.
sure. So like whenever I first started getting back into playing the deck some, I was just on the 2 to 3 training courts. Like it hasn't been 3 for a while. It's mostly just been 2 stadiums for a while.
Hmm.
But it was 3 training courts, then 2 training court, then 1 and 1 with trying the Crystal Cave. But I do like the idea of Temple. Like it's just such a power spike card in certain matchups. So and like at least it answers things like if you want a stadium bump, that's cool. Like especially I don't know. I think it's really worth considering because there are times that it's just like it's
Yeah,
just the stones against Lugia.
agreed. The hard part is you have to fit another switch in. Then, as soon as you cut
Yeah,
any beaches, you have to play another switch, and that's just like
and I don't
it's
think you're
hard.
gonna play. I don't think you're gonna cut anything else for a stadium. Like you're cutting a stadium. You're
Right.
not gonna play 3.
No,
So
no, it's those slots. So then, do we fit another switch in? Which is hard.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but I think we probably should call it there. We're pretty much out of time. So
yeah. That'll do it. Thank you guys for listening to our deep dive, and we will catch you guys next week on Ancient Wisdom.
thanks, guys.